Medically, she's completely healthy. For reasons we can't explain, we are losing her.
She's dying.
We don't know why. She has lost the will to live.
Padme's death is not due to biomedical causation, but something more extraordinary. It is because of this true causation that Padme's death is often underestimated as poor screenwriting.
She can't do that. Shoot her or something.
In reality, it is a clue to pay attention because something very important is happening here. To dismiss Padme's death as an unrealistic event due to an unconvincing cause is to bind ourselves to a dull literalism that obscures what is truly important about her death. Primarily the fact that her death is more accurately described as a poetic event of great narrative significance. This begs the question, what exactly is the narrative significance of Padme's death? If we are to fully appreciate the significance of Padme's death, we must first understand the cause of death. The reason for this is because it is the cause of death itself that imbues Padme's death with its symbolic meaning, its significance. The best place to start is by asking the maker himself. That is exactly what Paul Duncan did when he interviewed George Lucas for the Star Wars archives. Paul Duncan says of Padme's death, "It's implied that she lost heart." To which George Lucas responds, "Yes, her soul has been crushed. The thing that breaks Padme's heart in the end is that Anakin says to her, 'Come join me. I have all the power now. I can rule the universe and you can do it with me.' So the idea of saving her life has become a minor issue. And that's when she says, 'Wait a minute. This is not what I want. And you're not the guy I fell in love with.'" Following George's commentary, I can only conclude that he is basing Padme's death on the idea that the heart is the seat of the soul. Regardless of which happened first, the crushing of her soul or the breaking of her heart, the effects on one compound on the other. The result is the loss of the will to live. Another way to put it is that brokenheartedness, a crushed soul, and the loss of the will to live are all expressions that describe the same thing. Some have argued that the medical droid is merely guessing that Padme has lost the will to live, and guessing wrong. This is harder to justify after George Lucas responded yes to the idea that Padme has lost heart, which is very similar phrasing to the loss of will. In fact, it seems Paul Duncan merely combined the two phrases, broken heart and loss of will, and George doesn't object to this. It should also be noted that with the end credits on this trilogy fast approaching, George doesn't have time to be obtuse. He is putting the explanation straight into the droid's mouth. The explanation is in the form of a guess, because the droid doesn't understand the type of heart in question. But for the sake of exposition, the guess is a correct one. The medical droid cannot explain Padme's death because his expertise is in the biomechanical heart, the heart that circulates blood throughout the body. But the heart that we are dealing with here is the aesthetic heart, the heart that appreciates beauty. This begs the question, what does Padme's heart deem to be beautiful? By betraying democracy and taking all of the power for himself, Anakin is abandoning the ethos of the Republic. By ethos, I mean the moral or habitual character of a society. In short, the ethos of the Republic can be called the ethos of compassion. By compassion, I mean the freedom from the fear of loss that allows people to respond to and alleviate each other's suffering. It is the recognition that if one member of the community is harmed, it will impact everyone.
What happens to one of you will affect the other. You must understand this.
Anakin and Padme have both dedicated their lives to this ethos. For this reason, both of their souls can be characterized as good. When Anakin betrays this ethos, he is poisoning the good, the compassionate essence in his own soul, and ultimately, that of the Republic. In Padme's eyes, the ethos of compassion, as it is manifested in Anakin's soul, is the most beautiful thing in the universe. This high appraisal is understandable because she witnessed Anakin's compassion at its best, when he helped her escape when she was stranded on Tatooine. When Padme witnesses the poisoning of that which is most beautiful to her, It results in an extreme aesthetic shock that breaks her heart and crushes her soul. The result is the loss of the will to live. This loss of will appears to complicate Padme's death. The reason for this is self-evident in her final words.
There's good in him. I know there's still.
These words can be described as words of hope, faith, and trust. This begs the question, if Padme dies with words of hope on her lips, how can she possibly lose the will to live? Is this not a contradiction? By exploring the literary background that informs Padme's death, an answer becomes clear. Before we explore this background, it is important to note that Anakin has betrayed the ethos of compassion before. That is, when he slaughtered an entire village of Sand People. Padme was aware of this transgression, but it did not break her heart. The reason for this is simple. In the case of the Sand People, Anakin was disturbed by his own actions.
I'm a Jedi. I know I'm better than this.
He still remembers who he is supposed to be, someone who helps people. Although, it is clear in this scene that his greatest virtue, his desire to help others, is beginning to warp into a desire for power.
I will be the most powerful Jedi ever.
In contrast, when Anakin admits to Padme that he has helped overthrow everything she has dedicated her life to, and is claiming to do it for her benefit, it becomes clear that helping her, as George said, is a minor issue. As was the case with the Sand People, Anakin knows what he is doing is wrong, but the real blow for Padme is that this time he isn't acknowledging it. What's worse, this time he is consciously planning to behave unethically in the future.
I am more powerful than the Chancellor. I can overthrow him. And together you and I can rule the galaxy. Make things the way we want them to be.
His plan to become a dictator himself is the most selfish thing he can do, because a dictator prioritizes his own feelings and well-being at the expense of others. That is, a dictator inhabits an identity that is entirely antithetical to the ethos of compassion. We can now explore the literary background from which Padme's death springs. George Lucas is a follower of comparative mythologist Joseph Campbell, who often spoke about the medieval romance of Tristan and Isolde in its various incarnations. For this reason, it is likely that this tale is a key literary prototype, not only for Padme's death, but for her relationship with Anakin in general. Because the story survives in incomplete versions by different authors, the following summary relies on the version by Gottfried von Strasberg for the first half of the tale, while the second half is drawn from the version by Thomas of Britain. The story charts the forbidden relationship between the Cornish knight Tristan and the Irish princess Isolde. The relationship is forbidden because Isolde has already been promised to Tristan's uncle, the King of Cornwall. While traveling to Mark's kingdom, Tristan and Isolde drink a love potion that activates their love for each other. According to Campbell, this love potion is also a poison, which means that their love for each other is the source of both their life and their death. Later in the story, the affair is discovered and Tristan is ultimately exiled to Brittany. While in Brittany, Tristan is wounded by a poisonous blade. Only Isolde has the skill to heal this wound, so Tristan sends for her. In Isolde's absence, love is poison, whereas in Isolde's presence, love is medicine. Only her presence can heal his wound. Love is both a source of great joy and extreme vulnerability. That is why love contains both life and death. Tristan instructs the captain of the ship to use one of two sails on the return journey. A white sail if Isolde has agreed to come, or a black sail if Isolde refuses. Unfortunately for Tristan, Isolde is long delayed by the weather. Moreover, his wife overhears his plans and uses the opportunity to take revenge on her unfaithful husband. She informs him that the ship flies a black sail. The result is that Tristan dies for love, that is, in great anguish longing for Isolde. When Isolde finally arrives, she goes to Tristan's body. She is overwhelmed by pity because she could not arrive in time to heal him, so she gives him one last kiss and yields up her spirit on the spot. If George Lucas is drawing inspiration from Tristan and Isolde, he isn't cutting and pasting it detail for detail. Anakin and Padme are similar to Tristan and Isolde, but also different. Tristan, for example, believes he will never have comfort or health in life again, if not for Isolde. We see Anakin expressing a similar attitude when he begs Darth Sidious.
Just help me save Padme's life. I can't live without her.
However, Anakin does not die the way Tristan dies. Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader is a poisoning of the soul, which makes it a metaphorical death caused by the wrong motivation. Anakin gets himself into trouble because, like Tristan, he cannot live without the beloved. So much so that he is willing to hurt innocent people in order to hold on to her. As George Lucas explained in an interview with Rolling Stone, Anakin's downfall is the result of excessive love. What makes his love excessive is that it is possessive instead of compassionate. The fact that Anakin is guilty of possessive love suggests a longing for power. Therefore, Anakin differs from Tristan. While Tristan literally dies longing for his love, Anakin metaphorically dies for power. In this way, Anakin shares something in common with another character from classic literature, a character that Lucas names directly in the Star Wars archives when he compares Anakin to Faust, because like Faust, Anakin traded his soul for power. It is here that a clarification must be made. Compassionate love in Star Wars occupies a similar position to that of true love in Tristan and Isolde, because it is the source of great joy. However, it is also a poison because compassionate love is unconditional, which means that it can result in self-sacrificial death, if necessary. Even though this kind of death is literal, it is not death of the most devastating type, precisely because it is motivated by compassion. In this sense, the poison is a good thing. In contrast, love can also be a negative poison if it is possessive, because possessive love contaminates the soul, which is a metaphoric death, a death of the most devastating type. Possessive love contaminates the soul because it motivates the lover to behave in a greedy manner that does harm to everyone around them, including the lover himself. In response, the antidote of compassionate love is necessary to heal this poison. Unlike Anakin, Padme is more like her counterpart from Tristan and Isolde, because she does what Anakin couldn't. She dies for true love. The aesthetic shock that kills Padme is enabled by her compassionate love for Anakin, which is provoked when she learns that Anakin has poisoned that which she finds most beautiful in him, his goodness, his compassionate essence. The lethality of the aesthetic shock becomes actual because Padme's compassionate love for Anakin is unable to achieve its aim. Like Isolde, Padme dies because she is unable to heal her lover. Like Anakin, Padme is more than just her counterpart from Tristan and Isolde. Padme also shares literary DNA with Gilraen the Fair, whose story is told in Appendix A of The Lord of the Rings. Gilraen was the mother of Aragorn, the heir to the throne of Gondor. Like Padme, she dies with bittersweet words of hope on her lips. These final words are reprised by Elrond and Aragorn in Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Return of the King. Gilraen passes away because she cannot face the coming darkness that threatens Middle-earth. Her final words suggest that hope is the ability to see the light beyond the darkness.
Mr. Fertile. Look. There is light and beauty up there that no shadow can touch.
However, her final words make it clear that she has given this ability to her people, in the form of her son, and therefore no longer retains the ability of hope for herself. Likewise, Padme gives hope to the galaxy by giving birth to the twins. Unlike Gilrain, Padme still has the ability to hope because she can still see the good in Anakin, but like Isolde delayed at sea, she can see the shore, but it is out of her reach. This is how Padme can lose the will to live with words of hope on her lips. The final words of both women ultimately refer to a hope that is meant to be fulfilled by others. What Padme's final moments express is a feeling of hope, submerged in pity and grief. Pity and grief for the diminishing of the beautiful, meaning that this pity and grief are symptoms of the aesthetic shock that became lethal due to unfulfilled compassion. The aesthetic shock to the heart kills Padme, not because her heart is weak, but because it is so sensitive and open. This distinction must be made. A weak heart is a heart that is afraid to feel and closes itself up. Anakin's heart is weak in that he closes his heart to the pain of loss when he attempts to seize the power that can cheat death. Padme, on the other hand, is a different story. When she confesses her love to Anakin on Geonosis, she's listening to her heart. That is, she is trusting its judgment. She is opening her heart and allowing herself to love the good in Anakin wholeheartedly. Therefore, the level of catastrophic damage her heart suffers when the good in Anakin is poisoned is in direct proportion to the degree that she opens her heart. Hers is a sincere love, free of half measures. Padme wasn't kidding when she said to Anakin,
I'm not afraid to die. I've been dying a little bit each day since you came back into my life. I truly, deeply love you. Before we die, I want you to know.
Unlike Anakin, Padme does not attempt to flee at the last minute from the true love that also contains her death. Although, as we have seen, Anakin winds up dying anyway, albeit in the wrong manner. What we can conclude here is that the heart that is vulnerable enough to embrace true love, despite the consequence of death, cannot be said to be a weak heart. On the contrary, such a heart should justly be described as a courageous heart. So, the cause of Padme's death is this. Anakin's possessive love turns him to the dark side, thus poisoning his compassionate essence, rendering it inert. In turn, Padme's decision to love Anakin wholeheartedly is a positive kind of poison that opens her heart, leaving it vulnerable to the effects of the coming aesthetic shock. The consequence is that when Anakin is wounded, Padme is wounded too. That is, her heart reacts like a completely exposed nerve when her compassionate love is unable to heal Anakin. She cannot bear to witness the ugly sight of that which is most beautiful to her suffering such terrible degradation. The pain this causes Padme is experienced as a grief so intense it drowns her will to live. Although, as we have noted, this grief contains an inaccessible reservoir of hope. Inaccessible like a hidden city. Now that we understand how Padme died, it is time to explain why her death is so significant. To do so requires an explanation of why Padme herself is significant. In my previous video, I explained how Padme personifies that part of Anakin which remembers or actualizes his compassionate essence. The part in question is his heart, which is like a sharp eye because it can see through the clouds of fear and greed. When he is corrupted by the dark side, his heart is blinded. As a result, he can no longer see or remember his compassionate essence. In a sense, the ethos of compassion is the breath of life, the very spirit of the light side of the Force that animates Anakin's soul with his compassionate essence. As such, his heart isn't just like an eye, it is also like a lung. Padme's identification with Anakin's capacity to breathe is hinted at when Anakin tells Padme,
The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe.
Later, this association is confirmed when Anakin chokes Padme in a fit of blind anger, an action that is clearly meant to convey that Anakin has compromised his ability to breathe life into his own soul. This is what George Lucas is getting at when he observes that cutting off life is cutting off breath. Appropriately, it is not long after Anakin strangles Padme that he is seriously injured, to the point where he requires the aid of the iron lung to continue breathing. Anakin's great error, ultimately, is confusing Padme the person with that which she personifies.
Are you an angel? What?
He thinks that without Padme the person, he cannot breathe, that he cannot live without her. In reality, it is the part of him that breathes the ethos of compassion that he cannot live without.
Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, essential to a Jedi's life.
It is important to note that compassion itself is so dependent upon the ability to actualize it, meaning that there is little, if any, separation between the two. This means that Padme personifies not only the ability to actualize the compassionate essence, but also the compassionate essence itself. In other words, when Padme fell in love with Anakin so completely, it is as if she became one with that which she finds most beautiful. Appropriately, when Anakin loses his ability to actualize his compassionate essence, she who is one with this essence doesn't last long. The result is that, by making the loss of Anakin's compassion the cause for the death of the personal beloved, the death of the personal beloved becomes a symbol for the loss of that which is most beloved of all, compassion herself. It is Padme's career as a diplomat that makes her such an appropriate character with which to personify, and ultimately, remember compassion. She literally spends all 3 movies reminding the Republic to maintain a compassionate character against the forces of fear and greed that are trying to disintegrate all of the symbiotic bonds of trust. The most notable example is from the 3rd film. While everyone is focused on fighting the war, Padme reminds everyone what matters most, with one of her most famous lines.
This war represents a failure to listen. Now you're closer to the Chancellor than anyone. Please, ask him to stop the fighting and let diplomacy resume.
What she is communicating here is that it is through the ears that the cries of suffering can reach the heart and move it to compassion. If the Republic and the Separatists would open their ears, their compassion for one another would be actualized, which could reforge a peace bound by trust. As it turns out, trust is the handmaiden of compassion.
We are brave, Your Highness. There's good in him.
Padme's role as She Who Remembers achieves its apotheosis through Padme's dying words. It is because of these words that her death is not just a symbol, but also a memento. In a society where Palpatine has succeeded so well in eroding so many bonds of trust, including Anakin's trust in Padme herself, Padme makes it clear that, despite Palpatine's best efforts, he has failed to break her trust in Anakin, and therefore, her compassion for him. Her final words are nothing less than a parting shot across Palpatine's bow, indicating that his victory is hollow, whereas the Republic's defeat is literally and figuratively a pregnant one. As a personification of compassion, Padme is like a white mage who has lost the war for the Republic to an evil sorcerer king. But before she dies, she unleashes a powerful finishing move, albeit one with a delayed effect. This finishing move is not an attack. Instead, it is as if Padme used her final breaths to fashion a healing spell that she entrusts to a little messenger, who then takes many years to deliver it to the recipient.
I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully.
Due to the spell's delayed effect, Padme does in some sense heal Anakin in the end, but not in time to save herself. Before yielding up her spirit, recall that Isolde bestowed one last kiss upon Tristan. Likewise, Padme's healing spell can be thought of as her one last kiss to Anakin, for it is through a meeting of the lips that one can share their breath with the beloved. After all, this healing spell is powered by her final breaths, allowing it to reanimate the dormant compassion within Anakin, freeing the beautiful from its ugly prison. Due to their shared love for the ethos of compassion, Anakin and Padme shared the same breath in life. So too they share this same breath in death, because Padme refuses to allow Anakin to forget his true love. In the end, Padme's death is significant because it is the symbol through which the fate of the chief value at stake in the story is expressed. By personifying the value of compassion with the personal beloved, Lucas makes the devastating loss of compassion more concrete and immediate to the emotions, allowing the audience to feel the loss deeply in their hearts, as opposed to stating the point explicitly, which would merely allow the audience to hold the loss in mind. In effect, Lucas is able to convey the extraordinary value of compassion in a more powerful manner. This approach is necessary because Lucas's goal is to impress upon the audience the indispensability of compassion itself. The reason compassion is so indispensable is because in its absence, life loses its beauty, the very thing that makes it beloved, and therefore worth living, even though the consequence of living is ultimately change, suffering, and death. Such a dramatic statement requires an equally dramatic symbol through which to convey it. By using Padme's death in this symbolic fashion, Lucas ensures that Padme's death is something far more special than a mere realistic event. Rather, he transforms it into a poetic event that elevates Star Wars into the realm of the sublime. Therefore, her death should not be dismissed as a product of poor screenwriting, but recognized for what it is, one of the most significant moments in all of Star Wars.